¿Qué tal amigos? Bienvenidos a un nuevo video en el canal. Estoy muy contento de estar nuevamente con todos ustedes. Hemos estado revisando varios videos a lo largo de la semana con este tema que ha sido pues realmente controversial, con este nominado por parte del presidente Donald Trump. Estamos hablando de Eric Chung, como les comenté, es el nominado de Donald Trump. Vamos a ver qué fue lo que le dijo Adam Schiff, que hizo que todo este tema, pues digamos, de esta audiencia, se terminó convirtiendo en un momento tenso. Así que, pues vamos a ver qué fue lo que terminó pasando. Quédense porque va a estar muy bueno el video. Así que espero que se suscriban, comenten qué les ha parecido el video. Así que, bueno, vamos con las imágenes. Adelante.
Mr. Tung, you just said that you're originalist and a textualist. So let me ask you, the Emoluments Clause provides that no person holding public office shall accept any present of any kind, whatever, from any king, prince, or foreign state. Do you believe the language in the Emoluments Clause that says any present of any kind, whatever, means any present of any kind, whatever?
Senator, you are quoting the text of the Emoluments Clause, and I cannot dispute with the text of the Emoluments Clause.
So it would apply to any present, including an airplane?
It would apply to the president, I believe, your Senator.
And I take it as an originalist, you would accept that the founders would have never subscribed to the idea that a president in their time could have accepted a multi-$100 million gift from a foreign state?
Senator, the premise of your question implicates live issues in the public and pursuant to the canons of judicial ethics.
Well, let me just ask you, would the founders have believed that if a president received 100 camels from a foreign state, that that was an emolument?
Senator, it's difficult to answer that question in the
Is it, though, as
abstract.
an originalist? Isn't it pretty simple? You've got the clear language of the Constitution.
Senator, one has to look at the language, but also the history surrounding the Emoluments Clause in order to discern the
I am looking at the history. Let me move on to another question. As an originalist, do you believe that the Obergefell versus Hodges decision affirming constitutional right to same-sex marriage, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, Obergefell versus Hodges is binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
I'm aware of that. Do you believe it was wrongly decided?
Senator, as a circuit judge, I would be bound to follow
I understand that, but that's not responsive to my question. Had you been on the Court of Appeals prior to that decision, would you have decided the case that way?
Senator, prior to Obergefell versus Hodges, there was a prior Supreme Court case addressing the issue, and I would have followed that case.
Well, would you have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell?
Senator, I would have followed binding precedent.
You're not answering my question. Would you have reached the same conclusion?
Senator, the conclusions that the two precedents reached were potentially in conflict, and I would have to follow the precedent that...
So you can't tell us at this point whether you would have reached the same conclusion as the Supreme Court in Obergefell. So let me ask you about the Supreme Court's decision in Lawrence affirming a constitutional right to be intimate among same-sex couples. Do you believe that was wrongly decided?
Senator, Lawrence versus Texas is a binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
Again, I'm aware of that, but I'm asking you whether you believe that was rightly decided or wrongly decided.
Senator, you're asking about my personal views.
No, I'm asking you about your legal views. I'm asking about your legal views. Let me ask you about another case. Do you believe that Loving versus Virginia, which affirmed an interracial couple's right to marry, was that wrongly decided?
Senator, my wife and I are an interracial couple, and so if that case were wrongly decided, I would be in big trouble.
Okay, so you do agree with the reasoning of that case, and you're willing to say that. I appreciate that. But you're unwilling to say that you agree that Obergefell and Lawrence were correctly decided. Why is that?
Senator, again, those decisions are binding precedent of the Supreme Court, and I would be bound to follow.
No, I'm aware of that. So is Loving. And you're willing to tell us that you believe Loving was correctly decided, but you're not willing to say the other decisions were correctly decided. That seems less originalist and more situational. Let me ask you this about your role in the brief in Moore versus Harper. This was a case involving the discredited independent state legislature theory, which would allow a state legislature, even in the absence of a governor's signature, to effectively overturn an election. Do you believe that the Supreme Court wrongly decided Moore v. Harper when it rejected your view?
Senator, again, Moore v. Harper is binding precedent of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, no, I get that, but you're still not answering my question. So let me ask you a different way. If a state legislature decided after an election to pass a bill, even in the absence of a governor signing it, to throw out absentee ballots that were mailed prior to the election but arrived after the election, would it be your view that a state Supreme Court or federal court would have to allow the legislature to overturn the election, would be powerless to correct that effort to overturn a free and fair election?
Senator, Moore versus Harper states that state courts can review what the state legislatures have passed as a matter of the Constitution.
No, I'm aware of that. And my concern, though, is that your unwillingness to embrace the reasoning of these decisions means that where there is room, and there is room in all of these decisions, and most particularly Moore v. Harper, for you as a Court of Appeals judge to narrow these decisions, it sounds like you'll take that opportunity to narrow those rights. And in the case of Moore, which I agree with Judge Ledick, the most important case to our democracy in a century, narrowing that decision means empowering state legislatures to overturn election results, and I cannot imagine a more dangerous idea on the bench. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Bueno, señores, ahí el video lo acabamos de ver. La verdad es de que, pues sí, por un momento se puso tensa la cosa, pero tampoco fue nada del otro mundo. Bueno, más bien no pasó a cosas mayores. Y bueno, lo que estamos viendo, señores, con este tipo de audiencias, yo sé que a lo mejor para unos pueden decir, pues este tipo de temas, pues qué, o sea, ¿qué tienen que ver al momento de desempeñar un cargo? Porque incluso Eric Chung-Ji-Tun ya fue en 2 ocasiones donde pues el nominado por parte de Donald Trump, pues se puede decir que ha mencionado a su esposa pues en un par de ocasiones y bueno, estamos digamos que analizando todo este tipo de cosas porque pues realmente todo lo que ha estado pasando sin duda con el presidente Donald Trump ha sido mucho más que polémico y sin duda todo este tipo de cuestiones que han estado, pues, digamos, involucrando a todo el gobierno de Donald Trump, sin duda ya lo están vigilando de una manera, pues ya muy cercana, por no decir como en términos futbolísticos, ya sigue, bueno, ya todo esto es como con un marcaje personal, porque la verdad es que se ha estado haciendo todo un escándalo los Estados Unidos, la política de los Estados Unidos, señores, en realidad se ha convertido en un circo total, en un circo auténtico. Y bueno, vamos a ver qué es todo, cómo se desarrolla esto. La elección de Jeanine Pirro fue sin duda para mí totalmente pues polémica. La verdad es que sí sentí que le estaban viendo la cara a todo el pueblo estadounidense al meter a una presentadora de programas de televisión de la cadena Fox a directamente estar dentro del gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Para mí sí fue una auténtica burla y burla total a todos los estadounidenses. Pero bueno, señores, aquí lo que importa, qué es lo que opinan todos ustedes, qué es lo que pues opinan al respecto de todo esto. Sin duda ha sido pues un tema bastante polémico, pero digno de analizar. Así que bueno, les mando un abrazo. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Suscríbanse, es totalmente gratis, es solamente para que ustedes no se pierdan los videos que publicamos aquí en el canal. Hay contenido diario, así que bueno, les mando un abrazo. Nos vemos en la siguiente y bye bye.